And another thing that I found out. So I put this, which is the Women's Study Bible, which has been a great study Bible. It's got great study, notes on the bottom. And I picked back up. There's no telling what the back of me looks like. I've been laying with my dogs. My hair's probably parted, and I'm covered in dog hair. But anyway, hold on. Here we go. Okay. So in this, okay, we can't see because it's in a Bible cover. But this is the Life Application Bible in the NIV translation. And right when I looked at the Amalekites, I thought, that rings a bell. Amalek, who was that? Why does it matter? They're getting blotted out by God for all time. It's like, I think we should know who they are. The Amalekites, the footnote says here, were descendants of Amalek, the grandson of Esau. Remember a little guy named Esau? They were a fierce, nomadic tribe that lived in the desert region of the Dead Sea. They made their... Now get this. This is why they're bad. It's not because it was the grandson of Esau. Because you got to remember something. What happened with Esau, if you go back and look at our story, it's starting to all make sense. It was actually Jacob that was the trickster. Remember? And the mama helped. It's not Esau. It's just telling you who this was, the grandson of Esau. This is why they're bad. They made part of their livelihood by conducting frequent raids on other settlements, carrying off plundered goods they killed for pleasure. God hates violence. Remember Sodom and Gomorrah? There was a lot of things that went on. People focus on the sexual immorality. That's not exactly what God said. He said that he was coming because of the violence. And we look at violence in our movies like it's nothing. God cares about not having violence be deprogrammed in us by seeing it so much, y'all. So here they killed for pleasure. One of the greatest results of the Israelite culture was to call someone... I'm sorry, not results. One of the greatest insults of the Israelite culture was to call someone a friend of Amalek. Why? Because when the Israelites entered the region, the Amalekites saw this was a perfect opportunity for both pleasure and profit. They enjoyed violence and they could, get a plunder. But this hostile tribe was moving in on the wrong group of people led by God. For the Israelite slaves to defeat such a warlike nation was more than enough proof that God was with them as he promised to be. Why is that? Because they weren't equipped to fight and win against an army like that. But you're talking about the people of God. You don't mess with the people of God. And then it talks about the fact that this is the first time that we meet Joshua. Just said that. Later he would become the great leader who would bring God's people into the promised land. As a general of the Israelite army, he was gaining valuable experience for greater battles to come. Now, what am I reading here? This is notes at the bottom. This is not the divine part. This is the notes at the bottom. This is what was penned by those who were inspired by God. But what it does do is it helps because somebody has gone in and they've put in little maps and they've put in little pieces like this that help you kind of understand a little bit better. And also this particular Bible likes to use life application, or how would you apply the scripture. Matter of fact, here's an example. If you wonder what is that, Beth, here's an example. It says, this is about Aaron and Hur standing on either side of Moses and holding his arms up. It says we need to lift up the hands of our spiritual leaders as well, shouldering some of the responsibility, lending a word of encouragement, offering a prayer, are ways of refreshing our spiritual leaders who work so hard for us. So that being said, do you see how that's a way to apply it? We should always read the Word of God with, how do I apply this to my life? It's one thing to read it and know it, but remember the Pharisees had knowledge. That doesn't mean they were good. Matter of fact, we find out most of them perverted the words of God, or they lied, or they tried to kill Jesus. So, I mean, they eventually did. Of course, it was because he gave up his life. But anyway, it was part of the plan, but they were used because they were willing. So this is why it's really important for you to not just know the Word, but to apply it, to walk in it, to live in it. And also, it's our story. So it's so interesting to just read all of this, and when I'm hearing about other things, I'm like, oh my gosh, I was just reading in the Old Testament about this, and this, and look how that even applies. It's wonderful. Okay, so we're in chapter 18. Jethro visits Moses. This is another interesting thing. So I'm going to read it as it is. Now Jethro the priest of Midian and father-in-law of Moses. The priest of Midian and the father-in-law of Moses heard of everything God had done for Moses and for his people, and how the Lord had brought Israel out of Egypt. And it goes on and on to say that. It just said that, then it tells you that, and then it tells you that again. So you keep reading. And it goes back to the relationship that Moses has with his wife Zipporah, meaning, and his father-in-law Jethro. But I got to tell you something. When I went back, I thought, I don't remember the name Jethro. But I don't remember her father's name anyway. It was Ruel. So I'm like, is Jethro's other name Ruel? I haven't found that answer yet. If any of you know that, let me know. But when we go back and we look up, do you remember when Zipporah, the whole reason that he got her for a wife was Zipporah came with her sheep, and they needed to be watered, and the other shepherds tried to buff them off and say, "Get out of here, we're going to feed ours." And Moses came in and said, "No, I'm let her have hers feed, get their water." And when Zipporah told her father about it, he's like, "You may have your pick. You may have Zipporah." That's how he got his wife. But his name wasn't Jethro. So I'm like, wait, what? There's also, I just noticed a note, Exodus 2:16. So let's just go back and see. Maybe that's where it will say what the name actually was. I think that may have been when I found out that was the name. 2:16. Moses flees to Midian. Remember, he's the priest of Midian. We just said that. He fled because, remember, he had seen a murder. And so when he saw two Hebrews fighting, he says, "Y'all shouldn't be fighting." They said, "Oh, really? Who made you ruler? Are you going to kill us like you did the Egyptian?" And so he flees. And the Pharaoh heard about it, but he tried to get him, but he didn't. So he went to live in Midian. Now the priest of Midian had 7 daughters, and they came to draw the water of their father's flock. That's what I was just telling you about. Then they said an Egyptian rescued us, and he said, so this is Exodus chapter 2, verse 20. "Where is he?" Ruel asked his daughters. Why did you leave him? Invite him to have something to eat." Moses agreed. And so, with the man who gave his daughter, Zipporah, to Moses in marriage. Moses agreed to stay with the man who gave his daughter. That's not the same thing as saying Jethro. Maybe the man was a shepherd? I don't know. I don't get it. So if you know the answer to that, that's one of those that we're going to have to sidestep and move on. But do you see? Do you see how you start looking at this and go, Because sometimes they did have different names. Like, I'm Elizabeth, but also Beth. And I'm also Elizabeth Ann. I'm also Beth Ann. I mean, so, maybe it's because of something like that. Anyway, so you have Moses, he basically, because, all the fighting's going on, he sends his wife Zipporah, the father-in-law, and her 2 sons away, which was Gershom and Eleazar. Is that the Eleazar? I don't know. I can't remember. We'll keep reading. We'll find out. Just keep reading. Isn't that what I always say? Okay. "My father's sword was my helper. He saved me from the sword of Pharaoh." My father's God was my helper. He saved me from the sword of Pharaoh. And he's talking about Moses. Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, it says it over and over. It says it many times. Jethro, Moses' father-in-law. Jethro. And then I see that Ruel. I'm like, yeah. He was the man who gave Zipporah. So he must have a double name. Or maybe it's like the difference in a Hebrew name. And I don't know. Okay, so anyway, he hears the stories of the overcoming, and it talks about how excited he was and how happy he is, and they celebrated. Jethro hears it, and it says he's happy again. And it's like, well, we already heard that at the very beginning, but that's okay. And he does a burnt offering and sacrifices to God. This is in verse 12. They have a meal. And then the elders came and had a meal with Moses' father-in-law, Jethro, in the presence of God. Then in verse 13 it says, next day Moses took his seat to serve and judge the people. And it was from morning to night that he is judging the people. He's saying this is what God's rules are. I will help you decide what is right and wrong, and I will do all the judgment. And from morning to night, he is doing this. And his father-in-law, Jethro, says, what you're doing isn't good. And so basically what he tells is he says, you need to listen to me. And this is a godly thing. He's not influencing for wrong. He's actually influencing. Remember, he is a priest from Midian. And he's a good one, apparently, because he says basically what you need to do is teach these people your decrees and instructions and show them in the way they are to live and how they're to behave. But select capable men from all your people, men who fear God, trustworthy, and who hate dishonest gain, and appoint them as officials over thousands, hundreds, fifties, and tens. Thousands, hundreds, fifties, and tens. And I'm thinking things like governors, mayors, city officials. You know, he's setting up a structure. And also, even in the church, there's a structure, right? There's how you can get help from people. Moses listened to his father-in-law, and he got the capable people. They served as judges for the people at all times, and therefore, the difficult cases they brought to Moses, but the simple ones they decided for themselves, and in this way, they made it to where both the people could get the answers they needed, and Moses wasn't absolutely worn out. Y'all, there's times for organizing, making good structural decisions in your home life, in your work life, in your church life, in the community life, that helps bring order. We serve a God of order, and it's okay to do that. So it's a very interesting thing. Okay, so now we're in, chapter 19. And you know what? I think I'm going to end it there. And we're going to come back to 19 and 20 and talk about 10 Commandments. I love you guys. That was enough for tonight. Okay? Thank you for your patience with me. I love you truly. Please comment below your prayer requests and your praises. And I'll see you in the next video. Love you. Bye. 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 Bye.